and we're actively considering our approach to Islamophobia, including definitions.
The Deputy Prime Minister of the UK and the Secretary of State, Angela Rayner, shut down a Parliament reform member with a very balanced answer during her British Parliament speech, which started an uproar in the room. While speaking about the government's ambition, Angela revealed that their role is to bring all the communities residing in the UK together and restore order and peace.
My department is at the heart of the government's work to restore order and unity in all of our communities following the appalling disturbances we saw.
Now, we all know that there's been a massive wave of social unrest in Britain for the past few months. With violence being one of the worst ones in the last 13 years, of course, someone like Angela had to stand up and talk about the recent protests and riots, especially the ones that happened a few days ago in London regarding Islamophobic and anti-immigrant agendas. This violence has been a result of pent-up frustrations and tensions over the immigration issue, and the demagogues have been making sure to capitalize on all of those negative feelings, creating a rift in society. Not to mention, immigration has been one of the core concerns of the British government, which has caused an economic strain, hurting Britain's economy, which has tended to decline continuously following poor policy choices. Consequently, inflation has been high and living standards have declined. Now, these conditions have resulted in some serious problems for Britain, including the rising tide of problems like Islamophobia. But what is the definition of Islamophobia according to the current government?
Lee Anderson. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could the Secretary of State please explain to me and the House what the government's definition of Islamophobia actually is?
Now, this is the question that has been asked very often, and the need for a subjective definition of the concept is not new. In 2019, a cross-party parliamentary group defined Islamophobia as a form of racism deeply rooted in prejudice against those perceived to practice Islam. However, the definition of Islamophobia also extends to being threatened by the potential impact on free speech and religious expression right after the bill to criminalize Islamophobia was being discussed by the government. So Islamophobia does not limit itself to a constrained definition, but is much more as hinted by Angela.
Well, I say to the Honourable Member that a new definition must be given careful consideration so that it comprehensively reflects multiple perspectives and considers potential implications for different communities. And we're actively considering our approach to Islamophobia, including definitions, and we'll provide further updates on this in due course.
The decision is one of their top priorities, as the wave of civil unrest has been fueled by Islamophobia after certain right-wing activists used social media to spread misinformation about a knife attack that killed 3 girls, which was wrongfully pinned on a Muslim suspect. While the police soon debunked this information, the fire had already spread throughout Britain, as the protesters went on destroying shelters that were housing Muslims or asylum seekers. So with the tensions at an all-time high, perhaps it is time for the government to ease the tensions between people while also criminalizing the extremists for creating a rift in the society. Now, this would be well expected from Angela, because this is not the first time she has raised a voice in support of the Muslim community.
Now, I know that people are angry about what's happening in the Middle East, and I said live on TV, and I say to this day, if me resigning as an MP now would bring a ceasefire, I would do it.
Amidst the brutal situation in Palestine, Rayner spoke on behalf of the Labour Party during her party's electoral campaign, where she promised to bring justice on behalf of the UK and try to stop the genocide of the Muslims in Gaza, Palestine.
And I'll be honest with you, if Labour get into government, we are limited. I will be honest, I'm not going to promise you.
What's worth noting is how Angela Rayner emphasizes that she will try her best while in power to insist on the recognition of Palestine without making any grand promises that would have been out of her power just to gain support from the Muslim community.
Qatar, Saudi Arabia, all of these people, we are all working to stop what's happening at the moment. We want to see that. So I promise you that's what we want to see.
Not to mention, while the whole world has averted from the ongoing genocide, Angela has mustered the courage to point it out, while claiming that they would have to build the area that has been completely decimated into nothing.
I will push not only to recognise, but there is nothing to recognise at the moment, sadly. It's decimated. We have to rebuild Palestine.
Meanwhile, her dominance in the government is decisive, as the secretary has flared up the Parliament House with her blunt speeches and savage terms that have hurt the opposition deeply in the past. For example, Angela once called the Conservative Member of Parliament, Chris Clarkson, scum during his speech back in the COVID days, which aggravated the opposition.
That's characterised their hindsight-heavy behaviour. But, excuse me, did the Honourable Lady just call me scum?
Order! 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 Order!
This was a fiery response against Clarkson's claims that insinuated that the members of the shadow frontbench were great opportunists trying to exploit the pandemic crisis. While Rayner faced an upheaval from the opposition, she made sure to make her point and emphasize her opponent was spreading inaccurate assumptions about the members.
Point of order.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I think one of the things I'd ask your guidance on is the honourable members saying things about the front bench which is inaccurate in their speech, and I'd ask them to withdraw it.
This was not the first time Rayner had thrashed someone like this. In fact, Angela Rayner has been proven to be the one who doesn't mince her words while criticizing someone and getting them into a line. For instance, like the time she bashed the opposition leader Rishi Sunak, calling him a pint-sized loser.
But Mr Speaker, I read with interest that the Right Honourable Gentleman has been urging his neighbour in number 10 to call an election because he's worried they might get wiped out.
Talk about brutal. Another one of the most notorious speeches by Angela was when she took British Prime Minister Boris Johnson to the cleaners, condemning him for the crazy inflation that the UK was facing during his tenure.
About to hit 6%. That's the highest rate since the early 90s, when the Conservatives have been in power for over a decade. Marred in their sleeves with a divided party, a Prime Minister losing the support of his backbenchers.
Angela Rayner has been the leading voice against oppression in the UK during the protests or other crimes. She is also not hesitant to give a befitting reply to anyone who tries to cross her way in any of the statements or speeches she makes, putting the opposition in place, which causes a scene more than half of the time. However, that places her dominance and respect in Parliament, which is evident from the clips.